I'm coming to Texas next week, so brace yourself. I might be in Dallas and you're in Houston, but still, two of us in the same state. Who knows what could happen?
It would be a tear in the space time continuum, I'm afraid.
We're
Yeah,
kind of getting rid of 1950s technology to replace it with 21st century technology.
yeah,
So it's okay.
yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
This would be the perfect opportunity to somebody to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and as long as you're going to make a comment anyhow, if we lost you on any of these acronyms or abbreviations, put it down in the comments below. Pat or I or our voluminous staff of professionals will respond to you and give you the answer you're looking for.
That's right. We'll look forward to it.
Mr. Pat Brown, it has been said for many, many years, aviate, navigate, communicate. Those are the three big. Fly the damn airplane, figure out where you're going, and talk to somebody if you have time left. But there is some push at the federal level to maybe cut back on some of the navigate and communicate stuff, and that's not all bad.
Not necessarily, Jamie. I think the official notice came out a few days ago to the general public, anyway, of a notice of proposed rulemaking to get rid of the RCO network out there, the remote communication outlet network, and that would include the little standalone RCOs that you see in the chart in a little box that says RCO, as well as the remote frequencies like 122.6 or something like that you might see on top of the little VOR data boxes, the 122.1 with the R after it that says that they receive and they'll talk back to you on the VOR. Yeah, they're proposing to eliminate those in the coming months, primarily because they're just not being used anymore. Um, Back in the probably in the early 80s. Those are the last numbers I've got. The flight service stations were getting something like 22,000 daily requests for service. Today, the latest stats I've seen are less than 300. So from 22,000 40 years ago to less than 300 today. And you probably remember, gosh, this has probably been 15 years ago or so when flight service was consolidated down to, I think, five flight service station regions. Well, we used to have 360 of those.
Oh, I remember I used to fly into Gainesville and I could just walk over to the flight service station and go inside. You could look at all the weather charts and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that was a big change. People who have only been flying for the last maybe 20 years never saw that.
No.
But there was a time when there was a flight service station everywhere. It was really something.
And it was really nice to be. I did that a few times back back in the day, but today there's only two. There's only two. Flight service used to have about 3,000 employees. Today, and I'm talking about weather specialist type employees.
Oh yeah.
Today, less than 200. So, why? Well, we can self-brief. We have so much information available at our fingertips. Now, that's a double-edged sword, Jamie.
Oh, no doubt. But I was gonna, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was gonna make that point someplace along the line that the knee-jerk reaction to this might be, what are they doing to us? They're taking away things that we need to be safe. And actually they're not. I just had this experience after Sun and Fun. I was driving one of the AOPA staff members over to my home airport where they had flown in. And he was actually asking me, should I use the RCO to get out of here on an instrument flight plan? Or do you have a better suggestion? I'm like, you have a cell phone, right? We have tools that we didn't have 20 years ago. They're much more utilitarian to us.
Yeah.
And as you just pointed out, when you cut down from all those facilities to just a couple, you save an awful lot of money. So the FAA is becoming more fiscally efficient, and we're
Yeah.
not losing any utility at all.
Yeah, that's true. I sometimes I worry about these kinds of things because, you know, I can't. Well, actually, I can tell you the last time I used flight serves in the air was probably 6 or 7 years ago when I was flying over to Lajitas, which is a resort down deep, deep, deep in the Big Bend area of Texas, and I wanted to get a weather report for there, and I actually had to call, I think it was Albuquerque radio, in order to, and I had to be at 10,000 feet to get it. But it was really handy to be able to talk to somebody because ADSB coverage did not extend to where I was going, believe it or not. So to be able to talk to somebody that could see some radar where I didn't have eyes was a real help. But on the other hand, it was 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 years ago or whatever was the last time I used that. So I get it.
Same for me. Last time I used flight service was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was on a flight from, I think, Pensacola or Panama City back here
Yeah.
to Lakeland, Central Florida.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the last time I needed them 9 years ago. Now I've got an iPad with radar on it in the cockpit, and I've got GPS that's got radar in it. I have all kinds of information I didn't have before. And I have because, as you know, I'm a cowardly pilot, just like I'm a cowardly motorcyclist. I have actually landed in Ocala on the way home from a long flight. And Ocala is not even an hour from here. But if I saw thunderstorms in front of me and I wanted the time to just sit and look at it and analyze, I have no problem landing and working that out. I don't have to do it on the fly.
Yeah, my wife and I were coming back from I don't know, Missouri or someplace a year or two ago, and the weather looked really, really good until we got into Houston, and we ended up landing at an airport literally 12 miles from our home airport because there was nothing but a wall of water covering our home airport, and it was clear enough to get in safely VFR in this neighboring airport, and so we were there for 2 or 3 hours till the storm passed, and then we flew home. So it ended up not being a big deal. But again, you get so close yet so far away. What can I tell you? But
Yeah.
back in 2017, the FAA started decommissioning VORs as well, as you well know.
Yeah.
And they've decommissioned about 237 is the number that I've got, 404 RCOs and 237 VORs, and they estimated the savings yearly of about $2.5 million. And so the proposal that is going forward is to decommission another 936 RCOs, and that they're estimating saving about $16 million a year just closing out and those RCOs. So it's a significant cost savings, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with that money. I hope they would put it into to updating the technical stuff and to
Maybe the
center in
technology could.
technology. Yeah, but
Well,
so
and
we'll
I
see.
think one of the misconceptions that the flying public has a lot is they read this stuff that they're decommissioning RCOs and VORs, and oh my God, we're not going to have any VORs anymore. And what if the GPS network goes down? They're not getting rid of all of them. There
Correct.
is a minimum number that they want to maintain as a backup system.
Yes, so that's called the minimum operational network, and there's some misunderstanding about that. So, dating back years and years ago, and this is just some round numbers, but years ago we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 or 1,000 VORs. And the FAA's goal is, in fact, by 2020, the goal is to have gotten rid of about half of them. That goal has been pushed out because they haven't quite gotten there yet. But the plan is to decommission another 300 and some VORs, but they've got about 150 of them so far have been done. So about half of them in the most recent batch have been done. But to increase the service volume of those that remain, such that if you're above 5,000 feet AGL anywhere in the United States, you'll be able to receive a VOR signal above 5,000 feet AGL. Now, they're going to have to increase the service volume on the VORs that are being kept if they aren't already the larger service volume. And it's going to require changing some frequencies and some other internal stuff. The FAA's got a whole PowerPoint presentation on that stuff if you know where to look. But the other aspect of that is that within 100 miles of wherever you drop your pin on the map, there will be a ground-based approach available to you. So, whether it's a VOR approach, an ILS, a localizer, whatever the case may be, some sort of a ground-based approach will be available to you within 100 miles of wherever you drop your pin. So that, in a nutshell, that's the MON, the minimum operational network. Above 5,000 feet anywhere in the United States, you'll be able to pick up a VOR. And within 100 nautical miles of anywhere you are in the United States, there'll be a ground-based approach. That's kind of the gist of the MON, because that's kind of misunderstood.
Yeah, I think it is. And, there is some historical precedence for this because there was a time when our best navigation aid was arrows painted on the roofs of barns, and that pointed to an airport in town. And then we stepped all the way up to NDBs, which were just amazing. But of course, anyone who's ever tried to fly an NDB approach during a thunderstorm realize that needle moves around quite a bit.
Oh
Then we
yeah,
went to the VOR, and now we've got GPS. Technology really is giving us opportunities that are way beyond what we thought when we started flying back when,
yeah,
Pat.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and there will be greater efficiency and greater technological advancements in the future. So this isn't something to get really upset about. This is just something to be aware of because those VORs will be available. And I guess the musical parallel will this will kind of be like the old days on music radio with the X, where people in Chicago were listening to a Texas radio station because it had 50 or 100,000 watts.
that reminds me of ZZ Top, and I heard it on the X.
Yep, that was a real thing, and
Oh,
people
I
all over
know.
the country listen. So we will still have availability of VORs if
Yeah,
we get up above 5,000 AGL, which for me is 5,000 feet.
yeah,
And the fact that the RCOs are going away, it's not really that big a deal because we have the online possibility, we have cell phones, we have all sorts of tools available to us. Why stick with an antiquated system that's not as good just out of habit when we can
yeah.
go to a better system that's more utilitarian, more economically efficient, and doesn't take anything away from the average GA pilots flying the smallest little airplane?
Yeah, and 2 or 3 years ago, maybe three or four now, um, we began to see in the chart supplements, used to be called the Airport Facility Directory,
Hmm.
we started seeing um, clearance delivery telephone numbers being printed in along with all of the other information. So those airports that didn't have a local RCO to the appropriate controlling agency, you can literally pick up the phone here in the Houston area. If I'm at an airport that doesn't have a little RCO direct to approach, I can actually pick up the telephone, dial, and the gal answers the phone, says Houston approach, and okay, or here's Houston clearance in this case. Get my clearance and off I go. So, and there's also long-term plans do call for us in general aviation to be able to get things like instrument clearances through our handheld devices, like
Yeah.
the airlines are able to do now in some cases. So the technology is there. It's making it available to us in an affordable manner. I think the future is very, very exciting. So I hope that the money that's saved by decommissioning these VORs and RCOs and other things that are coming down the pike really is funneled into more useful technology for all of us. We'll all win.
Yeah, and you make a good point. At the airline level, those clearances are a text-based thing that they have
Yeah,
on a screen. And, we may find that hard to believe, but we didn't see GPS in our cockpits at an affordable rate years ago. That sort of stuff comes along, and I suspect that will speed up the process of issuing clearances and really make them more accurate where people aren't mishearing or writing the wrong thing down. You've just got it. It's like an email. Just send it.
yeah, yeah, and I would hope that at some point AI gets a bad rap in some respects, but I can see a time when AI could be useful in determining routing and um, delays and ground stops and issuing the kind of clearances that we're talking about um, in a way we probably can't even begin to imagine right now.
That is a paragraph that our high school teachers would look at us with a very quizzical expression because none of that made sense in the 60s and 70s.
Boy, no kidding. No kidding. Artificial intelligence, really?
Absolutely. By the way, in this episode, we use a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, and we've got NDBs and VORs and RCOs and ILSs. And it reminds me of a time when I was writing books and I had somebody write in who was doing a flight instructor refresher course who was very unhappy that we were using so many acronyms and abbreviations. And my response, as diplomatically as possible, was if you don't like acronyms and abbreviations, you may have chosen the wrong industry.
Well, the good news is that there are a number of FAA publications that you can find all of these and more. We've only touched the tippy of the iceberg on acronyms at this point.
Pat, I loved covering this topic with you. It is one of those things that I think there's going to be a little bit of backlash from people who don't realize this is actually an improvement. It's good because we're kind of getting rid of 1950s technology to replace it with 21st century technology. Pat, let's get together next week and do this again, could we?
You got a date, my friend.
See you next time, man.
Adios.